I think you can proceed now. Sorry.
A very small number of people disappointed that they missed 10 minutes of the data governing board. Okay, so the way SFTP is used now, there's a particular tool we're using called Axway Secure Transport, but in general, we're using file transfer for participating agencies, alternate agencies. When you send the data to the Department of Labor, you're using the same application. When agencies send data to data recipients, they use the same application. When Department of Labor sends data to the data recipient, they're using the same application. And then I put here in italics, there's occasional sharing of the data between agencies in the sort of analysis phase of a request. So this is kind of voluntary. You're not required to use it for that, but we know in practice agencies occasionally use it for sharing data for the analytical phase of projects. So, but it is the sort of required tool that we use for sending data to Department of Labor for the data integration work and then distributing data out to the data recipients from the various parties. So again, it is used for every request, often multiple times by multiple people. And that's where we're going to make sure we understand the requirements for how we're using this so that we can transmit that back. In this case, BITS, the state IT agency, supports the application, and we want to make sure we're telling them, here's what we need so that it's configured in a way that works for the system as a whole. I will now mercifully stop talking. Well, we wanted to get some suggestions on, and this, I'm not sure how many ideas people will have, but any requirements for SFTP tools in this kind of expanded P20 what do you want to make sure happens? Again, this is not the last discussion for it. We'll talk with the data stewards, talk with agency staff as well, but we're going to make sure that if there's something that we want to transmit to the BITS team, then that we can bring that to them. And hopefully we'll be meeting with them in the next week or so to bring this, so it is a quick turnaround. I'll stop talking. Anything that we should be attending to for how the SFTP tools are configured to make it easy to fulfill requests, to increase the security for the system, any of the various goals that you may have.
Hey, Scott, I have an idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think a primary requirement is that the connections should be person to person. So instead of team to team, because individuals are assigned to particular data requests versus teams of people. It shouldn't be like a department here sharing data with department, but one-to-one. That's how we set up the initial connections. I don't know that they're all actually configured that way. I suspect there may be some folder sharing where there shouldn't be right now. But that would be, I think, a primary requirement. So like if I'm sending data to the Department of Labor for a match, it would be between me and Liam. And then if I'm sharing data with the Department of Labor for analysis, it would be between me and Dana. And there would be two separate channels. And if I have to send data to SDE, sort of a similar thing. Then that's one thought. And then the second would be, it'd be awesome, I think, if we had similar conventions for naming of the folders. I think over time they've been changing. Sometimes we've been like, well, is this the right folder? Is that the right folder? The name could be, it could be either one. As we have these connections between different people, it could become confusing to know which one to use. So some sort of convention around the folder name would be awesome. And then lastly, knowing what the process is like when we have a new connection we need to make. So there's a new request coming up where we know we have to send data to somebody who's never received it before. Just having a really smooth process for contacting the right people to get that in place would be super helpful. And especially because if we're a non-DAS BITS supported agency, and so if we're not a part of that ticketing system, what do we need to do? That's my 2 cents for today. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we have to communicate to BITS too, is that we have a lot of non-BITS supported agency use of the system, both on a regular and an occasional basis. Any other questions? I had a follow-up on one of the ones, Jan, you brought up. And maybe, I know Fred's here, so I'm going to try and draw someone into the conversation. I was wondering about the person-to-person versus team-to-team. So it is certainly the case that there are, within agency, there are data sets that some people would have access to and others would not. I don't know if that is strictly person-to-person or if there's cases where it would be team-to-team. So I'll use DCF as an example to say, would there be someone like a CT kind as one of the systems in DCF? Would there be a CT kind team, and there would be, 1, 2, maybe 3 people that have equivalent access, and any of them could be the ones transmitting the data, that it's not that each individual person, the individuals have access based on their access to, would be using SHTP based on their access to certain, data sets or systems at the agency, not on their individual identity. So I don't know if it's setting it up like a CT kind team, or having a person who has access to two systems that it would be identified that they're part of, like the CT kind system and the I forget what the other systems for DCF would be, or for DSS, like someone has access to Medicaid, but they don't have access to SNAP and TANF, but there could be multiple people with access to Medicaid. So I was a little curious if the person-to-person is kind of the right way to frame it, or if it is, system to system, or by data set, or just that. I'm curious if I'm thinking of that correctly. Are there cases where you have multiple people with the same access?
I think since we're talking mostly about, trying to manage individual requests, right? We're not kind of establishing an ongoing data workflow. Person to person, I think would work, and it certainly does keep things simpler and tighter as far as security goes. And I think it would work even on our side, because we'd always have a designated person working on a particular project. And even if there was a team of people working on a project, it's easy enough to say, this person on the team is going to be the one to make sure that the data flows when it needs to. And if it's not a person, my only other thought was that there may be times where we have a service account set up on our end, where I may have a team of developers who are, many of them might be involved in a particular project, but they're just using a service account to move data back and forth. That's the only use case that I think doesn't quite fit a person-to-person model. But I think we only would do that if it was going to be a pretty consistent back and forth, on a regular basis, which probably most of our projects would not be. So, yeah, I think person-to-person would probably work okay.
That's helpful. One of the reasons for asking about this is that the setup for each request is a little bit time consuming. There's no individual step in this process takes a lot of time, but identifying like which people it is for each request has been a little bit of a, it just takes a little bit of work to figure out from each agency who that person is. So while we don't have kind of ongoing requests, having something where we don't have to figure out the individual for each request each time, that does chew up some effort.
One thing to consider along that line, Scott, is that it really hasn't changed for all the requests we've done. It's basically been the data steward. So actually going forward, it probably wouldn't be me. It would be, although I'm still on the data steward committee for a little while, just during our transition phase to Sarah, it would be Sarah, who's our data steward committee representative. And, at SDE, it was Chuck, who was a data steward committee representative, and so forth. So I don't know that it changes really request to request. I think it's really kind of that role of the individual within the agency. I can't speak to the new agencies, but that's how it's been so far. And we haven't had to reconfigure that. The connection I've used with DOL since 2014 is still the one I use today.
All right, that's helpful. I don't know if there's other comments. We're going to try and meet with BITS soon and just sort of describe the lay of the land and make sure that we're kind of getting the most out of it, so that process is relatively as easy to manage as we can make it for DOL and the other agencies. So anything anyone else thinks of, please say the word after this meeting. For now, I can't see if there's hands raised.
God, I guess I just want to circle back to one of my points too, just to make sure it was clear that if there are projects that do require kind of a consistent movement of data back and forth on some frequency, weekly, monthly, something like that, it is it is easier for us on our end to set up a workflow where a service account is doing that work and polling the SFTP, looking for files and moving files around automatically. So it just depends on the type of request, whether that actually would be something we'd need to do or would like to do anyway.
Hey Fred, I have a question. This is Jan again. I'm tongue-tied and I'm frozen in my image. So can you speak a little bit to what the process is at DAS for the difference with the daily, monthly movement of data, which isn't something we're doing so far, but what needs to happen? How does that, can you just add a little more detail to that?
Yeah, sure. So instead of having, when you have data moving on a regular basis, right? Instead of having a person spending time every day, week, month, whatever the frequency is, looking for the file, grabbing the file, pulling the file down, doing what they need to do with it, pushing it back wherever it needs to go. You'd set up an automated process in-house where you have for us, we're using SQL Server for pretty much everything. So you set up an SSIS package to pull the SFTP site using credentials for a service account, right? A system account. So you'd be able to access the folder, look for a file of a certain type. If it's there, it grabs it, pulls it down, processes it, and pushes it back up into the right folder, whether it's the same folder or not, whatever, is whatever it's set up to do. But then you don't have a person having to actually do that work every single time. You just set up that system and it does what it needs to do. And you just got to watch the system and make sure it's moving the data right. But it's a lot more efficient to do it that way. But again, this is only for something where you're needing to move data back and forth on some schedule, and it's the same every time. It's just kind of updating what you're providing.
I see. And I think the piece that is missing in the connections that I'm familiar with, it's just, it's been me sending data to the agency, sending them an email saying, hey, your file's there, go download it. There hasn't been an intermediary moving the files, so that's the piece that's sort of throwing me off. I didn't realize that would be a step that would need to happen going forward, that somebody at DAS would have to move it. It's not going to be direct agency to agency. Or am I misunderstanding?
One quick thing. I'm DCF, not DAS.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. Yeah. No. I don't think there's any extra thing required here. No, DAS, I don't think is throwing anything in there. This is something that we've done at DCF for like program evaluation projects, usually, where the evaluator needs to get updated outcomes data every 3 months or 6 months or something like that. So we just set up a routine like this that just kind of looks for updated files and moves data on some schedule.
That makes so much more sense because you're an endpoint, not a middle. Thank you, Fred.
Right.
For that.
Yeah, no problem, Jen.
Okay.
Katie, I'm going to return the floor back to you and click the next slide.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is to do like a progress report on the learning agenda. The last few meetings we've had were focusing on the specific topics and questions within the learning agenda. And so we wanted to give a quick update on the data requests that we've received that meet the different categories within the agenda. So if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, so these are the topics, obviously, as a reminder. And so we do have data requests that fall within each of these categories, or almost full data requests. So, and then if you want to go to the next slide. So first is the college and career success that CSCU is lead on. Jan, I don't know if you want to provide any update on this?
Sure. So now that we have Sarah, our research analyst, on board, we're able to make some progress on this request, which is multi-years old. But it's great. She's digging into the questions that were posed initially and is a part of the memo that was drafted by a team early on when OPM kind of shifted things. And so we are making progress and doing useful things with the information, forming some placement information, not placement, discussions around how to utilize the data actively. As you all know, the Connecticut community colleges are consolidating, so there's a lot of change in terms of how we're doing things. So we're making progress. Thank you. Questions?
Great. So the next topic is student readiness. So we've been working on this data request from Yale to evaluate pre-K outcomes for kids who participated in the Magnet School Lottery in New Haven. So the data sharing agreements have been signed, data transmittal is in the works, and so hopefully we will have some interesting outcomes to report on in the next couple of months. For financial aid, so we had our MPP intern do a quick analysis of the Roberta Willis Scholarship program. Ram, Mark, I don't know if either of you want to talk about the work that Ryan has been doing.
Yes, thank you very much. So with regards to that, I just want to thank Ryan for his work, as well as Scott and Mark with that. With the last meeting that we were discussing, I informed you guys that, we're updating a bunch of our programs. A lot of our programs, we use Access. So we brought in Nelnet to upgrade our systems with Roberta Willis. And when that comes live, we'll definitely be increasing, our reporting ability exponentially. So with the work that Ryan and Mark and Scott and I have been working on, we're looking to be able to do, like, what's the return on the investment with regards to the Roberta Willis Scholarship? The monies that we receive, the students that do obtain those scholarships, where do they end up? Do they finish school? Do they graduate? So those are the things that we're trying to do a deeper dive on, and we're currently still in that process. And again, we're excited about the opportunity that come hopefully by July 1st, we'll have Nelnet live, and then we can even expand our ability to be able to do those research, additional research ideas that we have. And more importantly, based on the data that we receive, is there a potential to have legislation change, depending on, what we find. So more to come. The next few months is, like I said, it's an exciting period for us. Like, it's an opportunity that we haven't had in a very long time. So with that, I don't know, I don't want to take too much thunder, but I don't, with regards to Mark, if he wants to add, or Scott, if he wants to add anything else on that.
Ram, I think you pretty much hit all the points. Again, with the progress converting over to the Nelnet financial aid management system, that should provide much more robust ability for us to generate reports that'll help with the whole analysis of how state aid programs are working.
Well, thanks, Mark. And I think that's what we have for now, Katie.
Great. That's great. Thank you very much.
Oh, and I don't know if I apologize. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
I have a question. Really excited, Ram, that you guys are getting some help with your systems over there. That's terrific news. Yay. But is there a match with this data, or are you looking at the analysis internally?
Right now, we're doing everything internally.
Okay, thanks.
So we're doing a quick internal analysis to see what data we do have, so that we can then work together to build a data request.
Yeah, because ultimately, we'll, as we move forward, we're going to need to work with other agencies. So let's say, for example, just throwing it out there is, we student receives Roberta Willis scholarships, they graduate from college, where do they end up, let's say longitudinally, 5 years from now. So those are the things that, we're going to be looking to work on. And obviously with that, we don't have that data. So we would be working with P20 to potentially connect with the Department of Labor or other agencies.
I do want to mention, and we've kind of talked about this briefly, I think, before, but some of the limitations of our abilities, we cannot identify the students from the data we receive. We only receive their college ID number. So right now, I don't see a way that we can match up to Department of Labor records because we're precluded from getting the actual student name and or social security number to identify them. The other thing is our data is somewhat limited, and I want to remind everybody, we receive data from all schools who are participating in the Roberta B. Willis program. Any school that is not, we do not get data from. And the largest school that is not participating is Yale. They self-backed out of the program several years ago due to their ability to fully fund their own students out of their endowments. And we only get information on Connecticut residents who filed a FAFSA. So we do not have any data on any Connecticut residents who did not file a FAFSA, and we do not get any data on any out-of-state resident.
And so, and if I could piggyback on Mark's point, and that's why I said, the deeper dive as we move forward, we would need collaborations with other entities in order to be able to, ultimately get certain information, if that makes sense. Anything else? Well, thank you again, everyone. And we appreciate, P20's support and OPM support on this.
Great. Thank you. All right, so if you want to go to the next slide. So we have quite a few data requests under workforce training. So the first of which is the Office of Workforce Strategy data request, which we have heard from Niall a few times about. We also have an HMIS and labor CT hires data request, which is a continuation of a data match that happened back in 2019, but was outside of the P21 system. Lindsay, I don't know, do you want to make a few comments about that?
Yeah, so this was, I think, initiated by or through our relationship with the United Way of Greater New Haven. They want to, look at the match between, as it says here, like folks who are experiencing homelessness and accessing the public workforce system. So we just got that data request this week, like the documents to sign off on. So we're reviewing those.
Great, thanks. And then we have a WestEd manufacturing and CT data request that includes labor and the Department of Education to look at outcomes for graduates of technical high school manufacturing programs. And so the data sharing agreement is in the process of being developed for that. Scott, do you want to share what Lily had been working on?
Yeah, I'll introduce this briefly, and then Patrick or Lori, I know we're closely involved in if they want to add in anything else. So we'd had similar, I think, to the Roberta Willis analysis. It was preliminary kind of exploratory analysis of data without matching to other agencies, but with Department of Labor and some help from UConn actually done preliminary analysis of the WIOA adult program. Using Department of Labor's data to both look at, again, just sort of exploratory analysis of that data, understand the demographics of the who's enrolled in the program, participants, and then looking at the outcomes for those individuals, but without undergoing sort of the data match, just what's reported directly through the WIO adult data, and testing out a return on investment framework that actually was piloted through the Virginia longitudinal data system after kind of looking at different ways that they've measured sort of return on investment and net impact, the sort of before and after comparison for program participants. So I would consider it, again, sort of similar to Roberta Willis analysis, kind of exploratory initial analysis that would feed into future data requests, but it helps with particularly, I think, the Office of Workforce Strategy request that's incoming, but also just more generally, I think the being able to analyze the Department of Labor programs, the framework there is kind of something that could be done and replicated across programs. Again, Patrick or Lori, if there's anything you want to add to it, please weigh in. But there's a fellow who's had private foundation funding and then had worked through UConn. His name was Lily Hoffman, who had worked on this. She left at the end of December, but I think she deserves a lot of credit for getting some of this work moved forward and did a great job on it.
Scott, can you remind me what HMIS? What is that?
Oh yeah, and Lindsay, you're welcome to add it. It's Homeless Management Information System. But
Okay,
I don't know,
so
Lindsay,
it's
what is in HMIS? Maybe she could give.
no, that's okay. I just was trying to figure out what it is. So it's CCEH. It's Coalition in Homelessness. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I used the data source instead of the agency. Apologies for that.
We need more acronyms.
No
There's a
need to
shortage.
apologize. It's okay.
And then for overcoming barriers to success, we have another CCEH data request that is a quarterly data match between the HMIS system and the DOL wages. And Lindsay, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, just that folks who provide information into our system, they self-report their income information, and that's either been a challenge to get if they don't self-report it, or we're not 100% sure of the accuracy of the information. So we've been interested in getting some information from DOL to try and supplement and increase the accuracy of that information.
Great. So this is these are the active data requests that we have that fall into these specific categories. We have quite a few incoming or data requests that are in review. So this is just a more in-depth review of what is included on the data request calendar that is later in the slide deck.
Do you want me to click?
Yeah. Okay, so the next item is the executive board meeting that we have on Tuesday. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is the agenda that we have shared with our executive board that's been approved by our board chair, Commissioner Bai. And so a lot of it is what we have been discussing in this group. Kelly Valeries will be sharing the letter about that is proposing the data request that will involve many of the agencies here. We have a number of new agencies that are interested in joining, so we're going to take this opportunity to review the onboarding process so that we are familiar with the process for agencies that want to join and how they are approved and added. The CT project, which is that philanthropic effort, we had a learning session with them a week or two ago, and so it will be interesting to see how they can support our work, and then upgrades that reflect the conversations that we've been having here. So the technical upgrades, the grant outcomes, and the data request calendar. So looking at this, does anything seem like it's glaringly missing? or comments or questions about the agenda?
I'm just gonna say the thing we talked about the other day, which is that I don't know if we're gonna discuss nominations for a new executive board chair, but now would be a good time to just say aloud that that will be needed, right?
Yeah. We have a few more executive board meetings.
Oh
but
no, I
yes.
know we've got
but-
more time. You know, I just
But
think
yes.
it's always good to like take some steps towards that.
Yes. So Commissioner Bai's 2-year term will be up later this year, and so we should consider who could be our next chair of the executive board.
Katie, I have a question. Thanks for sharing this. Are there any particular key decisions that you're expecting the executive board to make, vote on, or anything during this meeting?
No.
Okay.
I think we're on the Office of Workforce Strategy data request, which I think everyone in this group has seen in some of the agency leadership. I think that's where we want to make sure we don't, but I think it's not the job of this group necessarily, but I think the Office of Workforce Strategy wants to make sure that there is nothing else identified. So they're not, there's no vote on that, but I think that is the opportunity. But they would plan to finalize that after the meeting, I think. So.
Okay, so my memory, forgive me, it probably has changed since I saw it, and my memory is probably not as accurate as it could be, but is that the request itself was unusually, from my perspective, unusually configured. It had like components in it as opposed to being, anyway, I just, I want to make, I think it's okay to have the executive board sort of approve a general theme, but approving a specific request when the details have to be worked out yet before it can actually be like, okay, we're going to on board with this. I think we need to make sure that they understand that there's a lot to be considered with this. It's not just yeah, we're going to do it.
Oh, right. So this is just a review of the letter and like the goal of the request, but the meat of the request and the creation of the actual request will happen after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, Jen, like that's exactly right too. Like it's the role of this group to approve and review data requests, and so it's not maybe we should label this differently, but it's not a data request yet because they haven't gone through filling out that paperwork. But it's a statement of intent. This is the direction we want to proceed, and the executive board has sort of responsibility for looking at strategic direction and priorities and alignment with the learning agenda. And so that I think they want to make sure it's kind of directionally correct from their perspective, that there's not some huge gap in scope, or that they want to redirect in some fashion and then go through the work of ironing out the details of the actual data request.
I also would say, I think this is the only, maybe only is this, maybe it is the only data request that is actually mentioned in statute. So, it is something that they are authorized to do. And while we can approve or not approve details, in general, we kind of have to do it. And I think the statute says it, that we will. And I'm very happy to have this discussed at the executive board level, because of the big concern on the Labor Department side is, resources to actually fulfill the request. Because and so to have our commissioner in a meeting with other commissioners, recognizing that collectively they're kind of responsible to make sure we have the ability to fulfill the requests that we're required to request by law. It's a good thing to have that discussion, even though I'll be candid, and there's been a little bit of turmoil here in the Labor Department over that letter, just because of concerns about these very things that Jan mentioned, that there's not enough detail. What are they really asking for? And so it's all right. A little bit of maybe turmoil is the wrong word. It hasn't been quite that bad. It's just been a little bit of concern. But I think they're concerns that we can address and will address. And we'll get this into a form that can be fulfilled.
Yeah, Patrick, if I could just add on, I appreciate those comments. It had been my hope, and this is in statute, that's a good reminder, that the requests that we're doing could potentially, the work that's going in, that Dana's doing right now, that we're doing on 30/20 27 through 31 could potentially fulfill this legislative request. I don't know that there's anything in statute that says one must do something brand new versus leveraging something that is in place. And we specifically went to Nile for feedback on that request so that the output that you guys are generating right now should potentially fulfill their needs. So I think we want to bear that in mind as we have additional discussions about what more needs to be done. So, sorry, I think I've given 4 cents now today. I'll shut up.
No, I mean, I think that's an important point too, that like the level of effort is, for the total volume of requests, it's not this one. And so I think that is, exactly right. Like there's certainly some things from that may fulfill this, and we have to iron those details out there. It's not at that level yet, but that's a good thing to surface.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we can move to the next slide. So the next, so we're up to updates. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is the calendar, which is really just a update of where we are with each of the active data requests. So you can see data transmittals in progress, and we have some data sharing agreements in review. So if there's anything missing from this calendar, please let me know. As always, if you are aware of any incoming data requests, please let me know. All right, if you want to go to the next slide. So data sharing agreements. So we have received approval and review from most agencies at this point. We have sent a package of all of the templates, the boilerplate plus all the subject matter to the Attorney General's office. They're in the process of disseminating them to the AGs that are experts in those subject matter. We've also shared the template with PTAC, and so we are waiting for comments, changes, and approval from these folks. So thanks to all of you for your work on this.
Oh, sorry to speak up again. So it's my understanding that the post-secondary DSA specifically for CSCU and UConn is not complete. So did you send anything?
We sent the FERPA one that had been reviewed and approved by SDE and CCIC. So when we get your copy, when we get your draft, then we can send it. But we needed to keep moving forward, so we sent what we had to the AG's office.
And so are they disseminating that to the post-secondary Attorney General specialist? Or, I mean, have they been told that there's work in progress?
We have left it to them to distribute to the sections as possible. If you can give us an update, maybe offline, Jan, about what we should tell them, then we could provide more context. But as you know, we don't have a draft, so there's not much we can tell them.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to say other than it's not done yet. So they'd be reviewing something prematurely, that's all.
Yeah,
but,
it's hard to, I'm not sure what we could tell them.
Okay.
Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So we have a learning session next week with the Indiana Management Performance Hub. So that should all be on your calendars. Again, if you have topics that you would like to hear or learn more about, please let us know. Future sessions that we do have will be an update from the Children's Behavioral Health Plan, BITS, and Connie, which is our health information exchange. Next slide. Okay. Oh, so I guess I didn't make a slide for the governance manual and playbook. So I shared with all of you the draft of the governance manual back in October. And so thanks for those of you who submitted edits and comments. We're integrating those into a final draft that we hope to have share with you for review. In addition to having it in a PDF, we're also working on putting it in a GitHub format so that it's easy to navigate and digest. There's a lot of information in this document, and also the playbook. It's the data sharing playbook. We are updating it to reflect the data request management process for P20 Win, as well as how other agencies share data, so that somebody who is external to the system can see how the processes work across the state, and also how P20 Win functions. So looking forward to sharing all of that with you guys soon. The next, so I don't know if, I know that we have 5 minutes left. If anybody has comments or questions, ideas for future meetings. If nothing, I can give you guys 5 minutes and you can start your weekends early.
I was going to take 1 minute back of it, and maybe
Okay.
Either Patrick or Jan wants to add something too. We were going to give like a brief staffing update. So one piece of good news, I think we have a new staff person starting here at OPM who will dedicate a substantial portion of her time to work on P20 Win. So her name's Coral Wonderly. She, I think, comes in with a great background. She worked in Ohio, the equivalent to Department of Labor. She's worked on education data analysis. She worked at Data Haven. She started 45 minutes ago, so we did not pull her into the meeting, but you will, if you're working on P20 Win, you will encounter her at some point. And I know, as Jane mentioned, there's a new research analyst at CSU who's also has a primary focus on P20 Win, and I think working with Department of Labor to make sure some of the needs they have for data integration and the role that they're playing is adequately resourced. But Coral started today. You will hear from her soon, hopefully, and see her at future meetings. Just a little too early to bring her in. So it's great news. She seems wonderful. So I'm excited.
I'm also excited to work with her.
It's great. All right, I'll stop screen sharing. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, have a great weekend, everybody.
Katie.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.